He says her name in his sleep, and he has never met her. That's the part the healer won't write down. 3 words on a wax tablet, scratched out, then scratched out again. Eyelid. Eyelid of where? The alpha king of the Grey Hollow pack wakes with his claws through the bed frame and a name in his mouth that tastes like wood smoke and birch sap, and when his beta asks him who she is, Aldhelm says the truest thing he has said in 11 years. I don't know. 94 women have stood in that hall. He remembers none of their faces past the threshold. He remembers this one's name like a bone lodged sideways in his throat, and he has never once laid eyes on her. 3 nights running, the wolf claws the inside of his ribs at the sound of 2 syllables nobody has spoken aloud in his presence. Eyelid. Like the wolf already knows the shape of it. Like the man is the only one who's forgotten. This is not a story about a king who falls in love at first sight. This is a story about a man whose body remembers a woman his mind was forced to lose, and what it costs to dig her back out of the dark, where someone buried her on purpose. Aldhelm has been searching for a Luna since he was 26 years old, and his father's body was still warm on the pyre stones. He is 31 now. The search has a shape to it, the way a wound scars into a shape. Efficient, bloodless, almost kind in its cruelty. Candidates come from the allied packs in pairs and trios, daughters of betas and war chiefs. Women who can recite the treaty lines of 4 territories without breathing wrong. They are paraded through the receiving hall at Grey Hollow on the first frost morning of autumn, every year like livestock that has learned to curtsy. He shakes 94 hands. He remembers none of them by sunset. This isn't arrogance. It's mercy, or what passes for it. A king who remembers every woman who failed to move his wolf would carry 94 small griefs instead of 1 large, manageable blankness. So he lets them go, lets the names slide off him like rain off oiled leather. His beta, a barrel-built man named Corwick with a scar that splits his left eyebrow clean in half, keeps the ledger. Aldhelm doesn't. The 95th woman is named Petra Ashvale, daughter of a war chief from the Eastern Hill Country. And she has a voice like a struck bell. Beautiful, carrying, designed to be remembered. She curtsies. She says his name correctly, with the old emphasis on the second syllable that only the high families still use. He shakes her hand. He smiles the smile he has practiced since he was 11, the one that means nothing and costs him nothing. By the time she's 3 steps back into the line, he's forgotten the color of her eyes. This is the order of things at Grey Hollow. This is how it has always been, until the 96th name is never spoken at all. He's standing at the window of his study that night. Stone walls 2 feet thick, slit windows built for arrows, not for view, but he stands there anyway because the cold helps him think. When the wolf comes up out of nowhere and slams its claws into the soft place behind his sternum. He doesn't fall. Kings don't fall, not where Corwick can see, but his hand finds the windowsill and grips it hard enough that 2 of his nails split, and a sound comes out of him low and involuntary, more growl than groan. Eyelid. Not spoken. Not even thought, exactly. Surfaced. The way a drowned thing surfaces. Bloated and wrong and undeniably real. He doesn't know anyone named Eyelid. He has never met anyone named Eyelid. He would stake the pack on it, stake his own claim to the throne on it. And yet his wolf is pressed up against the inside of his skin like a hand against glass, and the only word it knows how to make with that pressure is her name. Corwick finds him an hour later still at the window, knuckles white, jaw working. Sire. Find out if there's a woman named Eyelid on the candidate registry. Corwick checks. There isn't. Not this year, not the 4 years before it. Aldhelm has shaken 95 hands, and not one of them belonged to a woman by that name. Could be a dream, Corwick offers, which is the kind of thing a man says when he doesn't believe it himself. Wolves don't dream names they've never heard. Aldhelm says it flat, the way he states treaty terms. Mine has never been wrong about anything in 31 years. It is not wrong now. He doesn't sleep that night. When he does, 3 nights later, despite himself, he wakes with his claws through the headboard and the words still on his tongue, and this time there's something more. Not an image, nothing so generous as that, but a texture. Birch bark under a small palm, the smell of wood smoke and crushed pine needles. A child's laugh, high and unafraid, cut off too fast. He sits up in the dark of his own chamber, a grown man, an alpha king, and presses the heel of his hand against his sternum, like he can push the feeling back down where it came from. It doesn't go down. It has never gone down, not in 11 years, not for any woman who's ever stood in that hall. This is the first time his wolf has ever asked him for something it didn't already have. The thing about eyelid, and you should know this now, because the wolf knew it before either of them did, is that she has spent her whole life being the woman nobody finishes looking at. She is 24 years old, and she runs the orphan house at the edge of Hartwell territory, a half-day's ride south of Grey Hollow's border, in a building with a roof that leaks in exactly 4 places and a hearth she's rebuilt with her own hands twice. She has a scar that runs from the heel of her left palm to the base of her thumb, thin and silvered now, old enough that she doesn't remember getting it. She was small. Someone has told her, very small. And it was an accident with something sharp, and that's all anyone has ever told her, because that's all anyone seems to know. She has no parents. She has no village of origin anyone can name with certainty. She arrived at Hartwell's gates at 6 years old, half-starved, fever-sick, clutching nothing, saying nothing for 9 days straight, and the matron who took her in, a broad, kind, exhausted woman named Sella Drummond, who has a voice gone permanently rough from 30 years of shouting children in from the rain, never asked too many questions. Because in Hartwell territory, in those years after the border raids, there were a great many children who arrived with no story attached to them at all. Eyelid grew up. She stayed. She took over the orphan house when Sela's knees gave out. She is good at it, sharper-tongued than the job requires, the children say, but soft-handed when it counts, and she has never once turned a child away, even when the larder was down to oats and onions. She does not think about her missing years. She has trained herself not to. There is a door in her somewhere that does not open, and she has built her whole life on the good side of it, and that has always seemed like enough. Until the candidate summons arrives. It comes by Grey Hollow courier, sealed in wax, stamped with the running wolf, and it is, on its face, a mistake. The summons is meant for daughters of betas, daughters of war chiefs, women whose bloodlines mean something on a map. Eyelid is the unclaimed orphan who runs a leaking house full of other people's children. She has no father to offer a treaty. She has no name worth writing into a ledger. But Hartwell's beta, a thin, nervous man who owes Sella Drummond a favor older than Eyelid's tenure at the orphan house, has put her name forward anyway, because the dowry stipend offered to candidate families is enough to re-roof 3 buildings, and because, he says this to her plainly, without much shame, they shake 100 hands and remember none of them, girl. It costs you an afternoon. It buys us a roof. She almost says no. She has never wanted a king. She has wanted, her whole life, very specific things. A roof that doesn't leak, a stew pot big enough for 14, a door in herself that stays shut. She says yes because of the roof. She does not expect to be remembered. She rides north with 2 other Hartwell girls, neither here nor there to this story, and she stands in the 96th position, in a receiving line that has stopped meaning anything to anyone, and she watches the Alpha King come down the row shaking hands with the practiced blankness of a man counting ceiling stones, and she thinks, he's not even looking at us. And she is not wrong. He is 3 women away from her when his wolf goes still. Not loud, not violent, the way it was in the study 3 nights running. Still, the particular stillness of an animal that has just scented something it has been hunting without knowing it was hunting. Aldhelm feels his own spine straighten a half inch before he understands why. feels his pulse find a new rhythm independent of his will, and his eyes go down the line before his mind catches up to his body, searching, searching. He stops in front of her one woman early. Corwick, 2 steps behind, notices. Nobody else does. She is plain in the way the room has trained her to be. Gray wool, practical boots, dark hair pulled back hard enough to ache. Not the kind of beauty that gets written into ballads. The kind of face you'd pass on a road and not think of again. He thinks of nothing else, instantly, completely, for the rest of his life. "Your name," he says, and his voice comes out wrong, too low, too fast, missing the practiced courtesy he gives the other 95. She blinks, curtsies a beat late. "Eyelid, my lord. Of Hartwell." The wolf comes up under his skin like floodwater behind a dam, and for one terrible, electric second, Aldhelm thinks he might actually fall. Here, in front of 95 women and his entire war council, and the carved running wolves on the hall's stone pillars. He does not fall. He grips her hand instead. Too hard. He realizes half a breath too late. Sees her flinch, and he says the thing he has no business saying to a stranger. The thing that will detonate quietly through every alliance he has spent 5 years building. "I know you." She goes very still. "I don't believe we've met, my lord." "No," he says, and his own voice sounds far away to him, sounds like someone else's. "Neither do I, but I know you. You should understand what that sentence costs him, because nobody in that hall does. Not yet. An alpha king does not say, 'I know you' to an unranked orphan house keeper with no bloodline and no political weight. Not in front of 95 daughters of Betas who have spent 5 years and a great deal of their family's coin angling for exactly this moment of recognition. He does not say it with his hand still wrapped around hers. 2 beats too long, his thumb pressed without his permission against the old silvered scar across her palm like his own skin recognizes the shape of it. He says it anyway, and the hall goes the particular kind of silent that precedes a war council meeting nobody wanted to call. That night, Corwick finds him in the study again, the window, the cold, the grip on the sill, and says the thing his job requires him to say. "Sire, you cannot upend a 5-year search on a feeling. It isn't a feeling. Aldhelm doesn't turn around. I've shaken 95 hands in 5 years and felt nothing. Less than nothing. A handshake, Corwick, a formality I perform like washing my face." I held her hand for 4 seconds and the wolf nearly took the floor out from under me. Petra Ashvale's father commands 600 spears. I know what he commands. Eyelid of Hartwell commands a roof with 4 leaks and 11 children who aren't hers. Aldhelm finally turns. There's something raw in his face that Corwick has not seen since the old king's pyre. "Then explain to me why my wolf has spent 11 days clawing its way toward a name it should not know, attached to a woman it should never have met, and only goes quiet, fully, completely quiet. Corwick, for the first time in 11 years, the moment her hand is in mine." Corwick doesn't have an answer for that. Nobody does. That's the trouble with a wolf's certainty. It doesn't explain itself, it only insists. The council will say you're compromised. The council can say what it likes. Aldhelm looks back out the slit window, into the dark, toward the south road where Hartwell territory begins. I am not choosing a Luna based on whose father commands the most spears. I tried that for 5 years. I shook 95 hands doing exactly that, and I felt nothing. And I would have married whichever one made the best treaty and called it a life. I am done doing that. And if it's wrong, if the wolf's wrong, for the first time in 31 years, Aldhelm's jaw works. Then I'll be the first king in this pack's history to find out what that costs. But I don't think it's wrong, Corwick. I think it's the only true thing it's ever told me. He sends for her the next morning. Not a summons. A request, hand-delivered, which is itself a violation of protocol so significant that 3 separate Beta daughters faint conveniently in the hallway upon hearing of it. Would the Lady Eyelid of Hartwell consent to walk the eastern gardens with the Alpha King, at her own discretion, with no obligation implied? She almost refuses. She tells Sella Drummond, back home, 3 days' ride south, getting the news secondhand through a half-panicked courier, that she almost refuses because she did not come north to be looked at twice by a man who looks at no one once, and being looked at twice feels, somehow, more dangerous than being ignored. She goes anyway, because something in her, something old and wordless, wants to know why a stranger's hand on hers felt like a door creaking. Not opening, just creaking, the way old wood does when weather changes. They walk the gardens in silence for the length of 3 full minutes, which is, for a king and a candidate, an obscene quantity of silence. "You said you knew me," she says finally, because someone has to say something, and he clearly isn't going to. "I did. I've never been north of the Hartwell border in my life. I believe you. Then explain it." He stops walking, turns to face her, and there's something almost helpless in it. A king's face doing an expression a king's face is not built for. "I can't. I have no memory of you. None. If you held up a portrait of yourself from a year ago, 5 years ago, I would tell you honestly that I had never seen that face before in my life." A pause. His hand flexes at his side, like it wants the weight of hers back in it. "But something in me has known your name for 11 days. Before I ever heard you say it. Before Corwick confirmed there was no eyelid on any registry I'd ever seen." She studies him. There's no flattery in his face. That's the strange part, the part that keeps her standing there instead of walking away, because she has spent her whole life recognizing flattery on sight and discarding it. This isn't that. This is a man as confused as she is, possibly more. "My wolf doesn't forget," he says, quieter now. "It's never once been wrong. I've built a kingdom on trusting it. And it is telling me, with a certainty I have never felt about anything else in 31 years, that I have met you before. I would remember meeting an alpha king. Would you?" Something flickers across his face. Not quite suspicion, not quite hope. "Do you remember everything before you were 6? The question lands wrong. She feels it land wrong, feels her own hand go, without her permission, to the old silvered scar across her palm. "No," she admits. "No, I don't." Neither of them says the next thing out loud. But the wolf under his skin goes very, very still, the way a hunting animal goes still half a breath before it understands it has found exactly what it was looking for. And somewhere under Eyelid's collarbone, in a place she has spent 18 years keeping locked, something turns over in its sleep. This is where it should have ended quietly, the way these things sometimes do. A king infatuated past reason, a council scandalized, a candidate sent home, with a stipend and a story to tell her grandchildren. That is the shape the rumor takes within the week. The alpha king has lost his sense over an orphan house keeper with no bloodline. Petra Ashvale's father writes a formal letter of concern. 2 allied packs send envoys to politely ask whether Greyhollow's king has been compromised by witchcraft, because that is, apparently, an easier explanation than his wolf remembers something he doesn't. Aldhelm answers none of the letters. He spends every spare hour he can steal from war council and treaty review walking the eastern gardens with a woman who does not trust him, has no reason to trust him, and says so, repeatedly, with a bluntness that no candidate has ever used on him before. "You're doing this because your wolf told you to," she says, on the 4th walk, arms crossed against the autumn cold. "Not because you know me. Not because you've earned anything. A feeling in your chest, and you've turned my whole life inside out on the strength of it." "Yes," he says. He doesn't dress it up. "That's exactly what I'm doing. I won't pretend otherwise." "That's not romantic, my lord. That's reckless." "I know. Say something else then. Convince me it's more than that." He's quiet for a long moment, watching the wind take the last of the season's leaves off the birch trees lining the garden wall, and something crosses his face, fast, gone before she can name it. "I can't convince you of something I don't understand myself. I only know that every other woman who's stood in front of me in 5 years has left no mark. You left one before you ever opened your mouth. It isn't enough, she tells him so. She rides back to Hartwell 3 days later, roof stipend in hand, and tells herself the matter is closed. It is not closed. 3 nights after she's home, mending the leak over the north dormitory, with a borrowed ladder and a curse for every nail she bends, she wakes from a dream she cannot remember having, gasping, her hand pressed flat against her own sternum in the exact gesture, though she does not know this, that Aldhelm makes every night in his chamber 2 days' ride north. The dream leaves one thing behind: a smell, wood smoke and crushed pine needles, so specific and so wrong for a dream that she lies awake until dawn trying to place it, and cannot, and the not being able to place. It frightens her more than the dream itself. She doesn't tell Sella, she doesn't tell anyone. But she starts, without admitting it to herself, watching the South Road for a courier in Grey Hollow Grey. He comes himself, eventually, unannounced, against every rule of protocol, with Corwick trailing 2 steps behind, looking like a man who has given up arguing, and finds her on the orphan house roof in a too big coat, hammer in hand, hair come loose from its pins. "This isn't where kings visit," she says, looking down at him from the ladder, equal parts startled and unimpressed. "I'm aware. You came 2 days' ride to watch me fix a roof." "I came," he says, "because the wolf wouldn't let me sleep, and I had run out of reasons to stay away." She climbs down, doesn't offer her hand this time, and he doesn't ask for it, though something in his jaw tightens at the absence. "I dreamed about Woodsmoke 3 nights ago," she says, before she can stop herself, before she's decided whether she means to say it at all. "And pine needles. I don't know why. I've never built a fire that smelled like that, not here." His whole body goes still, the same stillness she half noticed in the receiving hall, the predator stillness of a thing that has just heard something it has been straining to hear for 11 days. "Grey Hollow's northern forest," he says slowly. "It's birch and old pine, mostly. The smoke smells different there than anywhere else in the territory. I'd know it blind. Neither of them says what they're both thinking. But Eyelid's hand finds the silvered scar across her palm again, an old habit she's never noticed herself doing, and Aldhelm's eyes track the movement like he's seen it before. Somewhere, sometime, in a life neither of them can reach. "I want to bring in a memory keeper," he says finally. "An old woman, lives 2 valleys north, half blind, sharper than anyone I know. She works with pack-bond echoes, the kind of thing a wolf carries that a mind has buried. I want her to look at both of us. And if there's nothing to find, then there's nothing to find, and I'll have wasted an old woman's afternoon in your patience." A pause. But Eyelid, "I don't think there's nothing." She should say no. Every practical bone in her body, built over 18 years, of asking no questions about the years she can't remember, tells her to say no. She says yes, because the smell of wood smoke and pine has followed her into 3 more dreams since the first, and because some door in her, long shut, has started, very quietly, to rattle on its hinges. The memory keeper's name is Iseult, and she has one eye gone milk-white with age, and the other so dark and sharp it seems to see straight through whatever it lands on. She works by touch and scent more than sight these days, she says, settling them both at her hearth fire with the bluntness of a woman who has stopped performing patience decades ago. "Give me your hands, both of you, together." It is, Eyelid notes, the first time since the receiving hall that her hand has been back in his, and this time neither of them pretends it's nothing. The wolf under Aldhelm's skin presses forward the instant their palms meet, urgent, almost grateful, and Eyelid feels something answer it from somewhere low in her own chest, a pull she has no name for and no defense against. Iseult closes her eyes, holds their joined hands between both of hers, and is quiet long enough that the fire pops twice and a log settles before she speaks again. "There's a wall," she says. "Not in your minds. Older than that. Pack bonds remember in the body before the body remembers in the mind. And there's a wall here, built deliberate, built by someone who knew exactly what they were sealing off. Her milk-white eye turns, unseeing, toward Aldhelm. Your wolf has been scratching at this wall for 11 years, boy. It only started howling loud enough for you to hear it once she stood in your hall. 11 years, Aldhelm repeats. Not 11 days. 11 years, Iseult confirms. Since you came of age and your wolf's senses sharpened enough to recognize what was missing, it's been waiting all this time. It only had something to point at once it could scent her again. Eyelid's voice comes out smaller than she intends. Scent her again. Iseult's grip tightens on their hands. There's a memory under this wall. A real one. Not a dream, not a feeling. 2 children. A summer. I can't see the shape of it, not from here, not with the wall this strong. But I can tell you this much for certain. She opens her dark eye fully, fixes it on Eyelid with an intensity that makes the younger woman want to look away and cannot. Whatever happened to seal this off, it was not natural. Memory doesn't wall itself this clean. Someone did this. Someone with a pack-bond witch's training and a reason strong enough to erase a king's heir and a 6-year-old girl on the same day. The room goes silent except for the fire. My lord, Eyelid says, formal suddenly, the way she gets when the ground shifts under her. I was 6 when I came to Hartwell. I had a fever. I didn't speak for 9 days. I was 16, Aldhelm says, slow, like he's pulling the words up from somewhere submerged. 16, the summer my mother died. I don't remember most of that summer. I've always thought it was grief. Everyone told me it was grief. Iseult releases their hands. The absence of her grip leaves something colder in the room than the missing fire warmth accounts for. Grief doesn't build walls this clean, boy. Grief is messy. This is craft. Can you take it down? Eyelid asks. Her voice has gone very quiet. The wall. I can try. It'll hurt. Old wounds always do, once you stop letting the scar do the work for you. Iseult looks between them, something almost gentle in the dark eye now. But you should both understand, once it's down, it doesn't go back up. Whatever's under there, you'll carry it the rest of your lives. Some folk would rather keep the wall. Eyelid looks at Aldhelm. He's watching her, not the old woman. His jaw set in a way she's starting to recognize as the look he gets right before he says something he means completely. I've spent 11 years feeling the shape of something I couldn't name, he says. I'd rather know what it is, even if it costs. Eyelid thinks of the orphan house, the 4 leaks in the roof. The 18 years of not asking, because not asking had always felt safer than finding an answer she couldn't carry. She thinks of wood smoke and pine needles, and a scar she's never remembered earning, and a king's hand that fit against hers like a door that had been waiting a long time to be opened by exactly this key. Take it down, she says. What comes back is not a vision, not the way the bards would tell it. It comes back in pieces, over 3 days, the way drowning men remember the moment of going under, out of order, sensory before sensible, smell before sight before sound. First, birch bark under a small palm, rough and papery, and the particular cold water smell of a stream running fast over stone. Then, a boy's voice, younger than Aldhelm's is now but unmistakably his, laughing at something. Catch me, then, if you're so quick, and a girl's laugh chasing it, breathless, delighted, utterly without fear. Then, hands. Small ones, a boy's and a girl's, pressed palm to palm in the particular solemn way children make promises they don't yet understand the weight of. Pack bond, T. Aldhelm hears himself say, in his 16-year-old voice, half a joke, half not. My wolf likes you. That means something. Means we're tied now, forever, probably. And the girl, 6 years old, dark-haired, a scrape healing on her palm from a fall off the same streamstone an hour earlier, laughs at him and says, Forever's a big word for a boy who can't catch me. It comes back to Eyelid in the orphan house kitchen, mid-stir of a stew pot, and she has to sit down hard on the bench before her legs give out under her, because she remembers, actually remembers, not dreamed, not imagined, a summer at her father's hunting lodge on the border of Grey Hollow's northern forest, A summer when she was small and had a father at all, which is a fact her whole adult life has somehow never contained until this exact moment. It comes back to Aldhelm in the war room. Mid-sentence in a briefing he forgets entirely. And Corwick has to catch him by the shoulder before he goes down, because he remembers a boy of 16 who loved a girl of 6, the way an older brother loves a small, fierce shadow that follows him everywhere. Not romance. Not yet, just the first imprint of a wolf recognizing its other half, before either of them had words for what that meant. They were never strangers. They were children who loved each other for one perfect summer, in the way children do. Uncomplicated, total, certain, and somewhere in that certainty, a 6-year-old girl's wolf and a 16-year-old boy's wolf made a bond neither of them was old enough to understand they were making. And then it ends. The memory simply stops, mid-law, midstream, midsummer. A hard cut, the kind that only happens when something is cut on purpose. This is the assumption you've been carrying since the cold open, the one the whole story has let you hold without question. That this is two strangers, drawn together by an inexplicable fated pull. The way these stories always go. It was never that. It was always a debt coming due. A bond made and buried, not born from nothing, but stolen from something. The ache was never new. It was old. It had simply been hidden from the two people who'd earned the right to feel it. When Isiel brings them both back to her hearth fire to compare what surfaced, her dark eye goes hard and flat in a way that has nothing to do with age. That's not a natural stop, she says. Memories don't end like that. Clean, mid-breath. That's a witch's hand, cutting a thread on purpose. And from the look of the wound it left, whoever did it was paid well to do it quiet. Who would benefit, Aldhelm says slowly, from erasing a bond between Grey Hollow's heir and a border lord's daughter? Eyelid's voice comes out flat. My father was a border lord. Was? There was a fire at the hunting lodge. The summer I was 6. She says it the way you say a fact you've recited so many times it stopped having weight. Except it's never had this weight before. Never had a face and a name and a laughing boy attached to it. Everyone died except me. I was found 3 days later, alone, half a day's walk from the ashes, fever-sick, saying nothing. That's the whole of what anyone's ever told me about it. The fire pops. Nobody speaks for a long moment. My mother died that same summer, Aldhelm says, very quietly. I was told it was illness. I was told I took it badly, that the grief addled my memory of the whole season. I never questioned it. Why would I? Grief does strange things to a mind. Isiel's good eye moves between them, sharp as a blade. Or someone told a grieving boy a story he was primed to believe, and told a fevered 6-year-old nothing at all, because a child who remembers nothing asks no questions. A pause, heavy as stone. Someone burned a hunting lodge and a border lord's family to the ground, boy, and then paid a witch to make sure the one survivor and the one witness never compared notes. The one witness, Aldhelm repeats, and something in his face has gone very cold, very still, the look of a king doing arithmetic he does not want to finish. I was at that lodge. I was the witness. And you, Isiel says to Eyelid, gentler now, but not soft, where the loose end nobody finished tying off. A 6-year-old girl is easy to lose in a fever-sick crowd of war orphans, easy to let the records blur. Nobody expected her to grow up and walk into a king's receiving hall on a roof stipend and a borrowed dress. Eyelid's hand finds the scar on her palm, the scar she's never remembered earning. The scar from a fall off a streamstone on a summer afternoon 18 years gone. And for the first time in her life, the silence around her missing years doesn't feel like safety. It feels like a held breath she has finally let go. Who? She says, and her voice doesn't shake, though everything else in her does, benefits from a dead border lord and a king's heir who can't remember why he should care. Aldhelm's jaw is iron. Someone who didn't want Grey Hollow allied with a border house that controlled the northern pass. Someone who's spent 11 years benefiting from a war council that never asks why the northern border treaties keep favoring one particular family He looks up, and there's nothing soft left in his face at all. Corwick's predecessor held the beta seat for 30 years before Corwick, Garrick Thorne. He negotiated every northern border treaty since before I was born. Is he still living? He's the Eastern envoy now. Liaison to Petra Ashvale's father, as it happens. Aldhelm's voice has gone flat and dangerous in a way Eyelid has not heard from him before. Not the gentle, half-helpless man from the garden walks, but something underneath that, older, harder, exactly as much an alpha as his title claims. He's 2 days' ride from here, and he is going to explain to me, in detail, why a border lord's hunting lodge burned 18 years ago, and why his heir's memory of that day was scrubbed clean by a hired hand. Garrick Thorne is 61 years old, silver-bearded, with a left hand missing its smallest finger from a border skirmish decades back. The detail everyone remembers about him, the thing he tells at feasts as a war story. He has spent 18 years building a reputation as Grey Hollow's most trusted elder statesman, and he does not, at first, understand why the Alpha King has ridden 2 days unannounced to stand in his study doorway with a woman from Hartwell at his shoulder, and murder held very carefully behind his teeth. Sire. Thorne rises, bows, performs the gesture flawlessly the way he has performed every gesture flawlessly for 40 years. This is an honor I wasn't expecting. Tell me about the Ashgrave Hunting Lodge fire, Aldhelm says. No preamble, no courtesy. 18 years ago, northern border. Something moves behind Thorne's eyes, fast, controlled, nearly invisible, nearly. A tragedy. The Ashgrave line, lost to a kitchen fire that spread to the timber stores. I remember it well. Terrible loss to the northern treaties. A kitchen fire. That was the finding, sire. Whose finding? A pause, very brief. Mine. I conducted the inquiry myself at your father's request. I was beta then. Eyelid has not said a word. She is watching Thorne's hands. The missing finger, the way his remaining fingers have gone very still against the desk's edge, the stillness of a man choosing each word like a man crossing a frozen river, one careful step at a time. There was a survivor, Aldhelm says. A 6-year-old girl. What became of the inquiry into how she survived when the rest of the household didn't? I don't recall the particulars, sire. It was 18 years ago, and a great many border tragedies have passed through this office since. You recall the finger you lost negotiating the Pelham Ridge boundary 11 years before that fire, Aldhelm says, very quiet. You've told the story at every feast since I was a child. Don't tell me your memory fails you selectively, Garrick. The room goes still. Outside, a hawk cries once, far off, and the sound carries strange and sharp through the quiet. You also negotiated every northern border treaty for 30 years, Aldhelm continues, including the redistribution of the Ashgrave lands after the fire, lands that, as I recall, ended up partitioned to 3 families who have voted with you on every council matter since. And you arranged a memory witch's services for a grieving 16-year-old heir who never thought to question why his memory of that summer had gone soft at the edges. That's a great deal of convenient arrangement for one tragic kitchen fire, Garrick. Thorne's composure doesn't crack so much as it simply, quietly, stops being maintained. He sits back down slowly, an old man's weight settling into an old man's chair, and for a moment he looks every one of his 61 years. She was never supposed to survive, he says finally, and his voice has lost all its courtroom polish. The fire was meant to be total. I told the men, no survivors, the line ends clean, no loose threads to chase later. His eyes go, for the first time, to Elid, and something in his face does something complicated. Not quite remorse, not quite indifference. Something caught between the two, and ashamed of both. When word came back that a child had been found alive a half-day's walk from the ashes, I made a different kind of arrangement. A quieter one. A fevered child remembers nothing reliably. I had her placed where the border orphan records were thinnest. I assumed the matter closed. And my memory? Aldhelm's voice could cut stone. You were the heir. I couldn't have you walking through your own court with murder in your face before you were old enough to wield it wisely. And you would have. You loved that girl like a sister that summer, sire. You'd have torn the northern houses apart, looking for who burned her family, and Grey Hollow couldn't survive that kind of war 18 years ago. The treasury was bled dry from your grandfather's campaigns. I made a choice I believed was for the pack. You burned a family alive to control a mountain pass, Aldhelm says, and then mutilated your king's memory to cover it, and you call that a choice for the pack. Thorn doesn't answer that. There isn't an answer that survives being said aloud. Eyelid finally speaks, and her voice is steadier than she expected it to be, steadier than she has any right to feel, standing 4 feet from the man who ordered her father's death. My father's name, she says. Say it. Thorn looks up at her, and something in his face genuinely falters for the first time since they walked in, the one humanizing crack in 18 years of careful denial. Edrin Ashgrave. He was a good man, a fair lord. I want you to know that I never. He stops. Starts again, smaller. I have thought of that fire more nights than you would believe. Not enough to confess it, Eyelid says. Not enough to find me. You let me grow up 80 miles from here not knowing my own name, while you sat in council voting yourself richer on my father's land every single year. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. You don't get to tell me what you've thought about. You had 18 years to make it right, and you spent every one of them making sure it stayed buried. There is nothing left for Thorn to say that wouldn't be worse than his silence. He says it anyway, a final, desperate scrap of self-defense, the thing every cruel man reaches for when the walls finally close. The pass was vital, sire. The treaties since have kept 3 borders quiet for 18 years. Whatever you think of how I did it, the peace was real. Peace built on a murdered family and a king who couldn't remember why he should grieve them, Aldhelm says. Isn't peace, Garrick? It's a debt with the interest still running. He turns to Corwick, who has stood silent in the doorway through all of it, scar-split eyebrow drawn tight. Take him. Formal charge. Conspiracy. The unlawful death of Lord Edrin Ashgrave's household, and the use of a pack-bond witch against the heir of Grey Hollow without consent. Full council trial. No quiet arrangements. A pause, cold and final. He's spent 18 years arranging things quietly. He can answer for it loudly. Thorn doesn't resist as Corwick's men take him. He looks, in the end, like exactly what he is. An old man who built a long and comfortable life on a foundation he never let himself examine too closely, finally made to stand on top of it and watch it give way. It should feel like winning. Eyelid expects, somewhere in the part of her that has spent 18 years not asking questions, that finding the answer would feel like closing a door. Instead, it feels like the moment, after a held breath finally lets go, when the air rushing back in hurts more than the holding did. She rides back to Grey Hollow with Aldhelm in a silence that isn't tension this time. It's grief, fresh and strange, for a father she has had exactly 3 days to remember and lose all over again. I keep trying to picture his face, she says somewhere on the North Road, and I can't. I have his name back. I don't have his face. I remember it, Aldhelm says quietly. A little, dark-haired like you. He laughed loud. I remember that, from the one supper I took at the lodge, loud and sudden like he meant every laugh entirely. He glances at her. I can tell you what I remember if you want it. It isn't much. But it's not nothing. I want it, she says, and means it, and something in her chest. The door, the old shut door, opens another careful inch. The roof gets fixed properly this time. Not patched. Grey Hollow masons sent south within the week. The 4 leaks sealed before the first hard frost, though Eyelid insists on holding the ladder herself the whole time out of pure stubbornness. The children at Hartwell don't know what to make of a king's masons on their roof, and a king himself, twice now, sitting on their front step in plain wool, with no guard in sight, teaching a 9-year-old boy how to properly knot a fishing line. He doesn't push. That's the part that finally, slowly, starts to dismantle the wariness she's carried since the receiving hall. He doesn't arrive with declarations or demand the bond be sealed now that the wall is down and the why of it is understood. He arrives with his sleeves rolled up and dirt under his nails from helping reset a fence post, and he asks about the children by name, and he leaves before sundown every time without asking to stay. "You could claim me," she says to him finally. Weeks later, on the same garden walk where this started, though the birches have gone bare now and the cold has teeth in it. The wolf bond's confirmed. Isolde confirmed it. The council can't argue blood now. Ashgrave land reverts to me by right, once Thorn's trial closes. I'd be a perfectly defensible Luna on paper now. You could simply claim me and be done with the asking. I could, he agrees. Why haven't you? He's quiet a moment, watching the same wind that stripped the birches pull at the hem of her coat. Because you didn't choose any of this. Not the bond, not the lodge, not the 18 years Thorn stole from you. It was all done to you, every piece of it, before you were old enough to have a say. He looks at her, and there's nothing of the king in his face just then. Just the boy who once promised forever to a girl who outran him. I won't be one more thing that happens to you, Aelid. If you're mine, I want it to be because you chose it standing up, not because a wolf bond and a dead man's crimes left you nowhere else to stand. It isn't a declaration, it's better than one. It's the first thing anyone has offered her in 18 years with no condition folded inside it. And if I never choose it? She asks, testing, the way she's tested every kindness in her life, before trusting it not to be a trick. Then I'll have spent a season learning to fix fences and tie knots for nothing, he says, and I'll count it time well spent regardless. She doesn't answer that with words. She closes the distance instead. The first time she's closed it, not him, and rests her palm flat against his chest, over the place where, for 11 years, a wolf clawed at the inside of his ribs trying to tell him what his mind had been forced to forget. Under her hand, his heart is going hard and fast, no kingly composure left in it at all. It's quiet, she says, surprised. Your wolf. I thought it would be loud this close. It's not loud because it isn't asking anymore, he says, voice rough. It already has what it wanted. It's just glad. She doesn't kiss him. Not yet, that line is still hers to cross, in her own time, and they both know it, and the knowing is its own kind of held breath. But she stays there, palm against his heartbeat, in the cold garden with the bare birches creaking overhead, and lets herself, for the first time in 18 years, want something without flinching from the wanting. The council trial for Garrick Thorn takes 4 days and ends the only way it could. Stripped rank, stripped land, exiled past the eastern border with nothing but the clothes on his back. Grey Hollow's harshest sentence, short of death, reserved for crimes too foundational for a clean execution to settle. He grovels, in the end, when the verdict lands, not for mercy, the council has none left to give him, but for Aelid specifically, on his knees in front of the full hall, asking a dead man's daughter to understand that he'd believed, once, that what he'd done was necessary. She doesn't grant him absolution, she doesn't owe him that, and the whole hall watches her not give it. Watches the woman who arrived as the 96th candidate, unranked, unlanded, dismissed before she'd even opened her mouth, stand over the man who tried to erase her existence and simply say, "Necessary isn't the same as right. You don't get my forgiveness for telling yourself it was." Petra Ashvale, to her credit, sends a letter of her own a week later, no spite in it, surprisingly, just a clear-eyed acknowledgement that the wolf doesn't lie and the council was always going to lose this one to something older than treaty math. Aldhelm reads it once and sets it aside, already half forgotten, because there is exactly one name his wolf has ever fought this hard to keep. Spring comes to Grey Hollow with the Ashgrave lands, formally restored to Aelid's name. The orphan house at Hartwell endowed permanently, so the children there will never again depend on a stipend or a beta's favor, and a wedding that the bards will, eventually, oversell. Though if you ask the two people who actually stood at that hearth altar, they'll tell you the part worth remembering wasn't the crowd or the vows. It was smaller than that. It was Aldhelm pressing his palm flat against hers in front of the whole pack. The same scarred palm a 6-year-old girl once pressed against his 16-year-old hand beside a fast, cold stream, and the wolf beneath his skin going, at last, completely and permanently still. Not because it had finally gotten what it wanted, but because what it wanted had finally gotten to choose him back. She still keeps the door in herself unlocked now, the one that used to stay shut. Some nights it still aches to walk through it. Grief doesn't close just because the mystery does, and she has learned, slowly, that you can hold both at once. The missing father and the recovered name, the stolen years and the ones still coming. Aldhelm never asks her to be finished grieving. He just sits with her, some nights, by a fire that smells, if you build it right, like wood smoke and crushed pine needles, and lets the quiet do what quiet does best. Here is the thing the wolf knew all along. The thing it took a king 11 years and 100 forgotten handshakes to finally understand. A mind can be made to forget. A name can be erased from every ledger, every record, every careful official story told to cover a crime. But the body remembers what it's forced to lose. Keeps it pressed close in the dark, under the ribs, behind the sternum, waiting, patient as bone. For the one hand it was always meant to hold. He met 100 women and remembered none of them. He met her once, at 6 years old, beside a stream that doesn't exist on any map anymore, and his wolf carried her name through 11 years of silence, through 95 forgotten strangers, through a war council's doubt and a dead man's lies, and set it down, finally, whole, in the one place it had always belonged.